Coming up this week on the Markcast. Well, here we are. We are officially 1 week away from crowning the second ever XFL champion, RIP LA Extreme. And while many of us know the original XFL 2001 championship game was called the $1 Million Game, did you know it was in fact originally just going to be called the Big Game at the end of the season? That's right. A history lesson for you today on the Markcast.
LA and San Francisco. It'll be a war this Saturday night on NBC. Folks are going to be in the LA area. Paul, you like the XFL?
Personally, I've never liked football, but for $1 million, I can't wait to see the game.
That's right. We are talking everything XFL 2023 championship game. We have ESPN's Matt Barrie recapping the season. What does the XFL do next? We crown a champion. What are the next steps? And what does Matt think about the weekend's matchup?
If I'm doing the 1 to 10 scale, I'd put it at a 10. And I'll put it at a 10 for a couple of reasons. One, it finished. You go back to 2020 when the pandemic through 5 games canceled the season, and I think we were all left wondering if this thing was going to be sustainable again. And so credit Danny and DJ and Jared Cardinal and the ownership group for putting the vision back onto the field.
Then a little USFL talk. Kevin Kugler, longtime friend of the podcast, back to the Spring League days, comes back on talking everything USFL Season 2. Is Fox hyped as we are for United States football action?
I see what goes into these USFL broadcasts, and it's cameras, microphone, everything that you would put into an NFL, a big-time NFL broadcast, goes into each and every one of these USFL broadcasts. The level of commitment that Fox has had to making this work is pretty remarkable.
And then I have been trying to get this gentleman on the podcast since the beginning of the season. You may know him for his food choices in Birmingham, Alabama. I prefer to focus on his play on the field. Devion Smith, running back for your XFL South Division champions, comes on the show. I hope you guys celebrated with some pizza after the championship game.
I might do it. 'Cause I saw something on Twitter the other day. It said, I hope you celebrate with a slice of pizza. So...
Do you like still being known for that as one of the things, or are you kind of over that?
I'm kind of over it to a certain extent, but it definitely keeps a chip on my shoulder because team missed out on me, my leadership, and me as a player. So it kind of motivates me still.
And then finally getting back in the saddle, CFL action here. We had the big draft this week. I was watching the Kraken game, but we have Ben Grant, Xs and Argos podcast coming on. We're talking CFL draft, Toronto Argos quarterbacks, including Brian Scott and frenemy of the podcast, Ben Holmes, plus just CFL offseason talk. What do we have coming up here in 2023?
I think it should matter. I'm so disappointed when I see numbers like how many starts draft picks beyond the second round have had over the last 5 years, for any given team, or what percentage of players are still on the team that drafted them 4 years later. And it's really low and it's really sad. I don't think it has to be like that.
1 week away. We'll see you in San Antonio soon. Hey guys, welcome to the Markcast. Reed here. Had debated going back and forth with calling this the bye episode with NSYNC this week. Settled on, did you know that? Did you know, we all know the $1 Million Game, right? Everybody knows XFL 01 $1 Million Game. They gave away $1 million divided for the winning team. The original name of it was just going to be called the Big Game at the end of the season. They changed it during week 3 because they thought it was too wordy. They thought that people might be able to copy that, right? You can't, how do you trademark that? But thought that was wild. Vince McMahon and all of his genius. The Big Game at the end of the season. Check it out on Wikipedia. Hand to God. Mind blown. But we are talking the XFL 2023 championship game today. Matt Barrie coming back on the show from ESPN, getting Matt's thoughts, grading the XFL season as a whole now that we're through the regular season. What does Matt think that they did right? The future of alternative football and the XFL's place and all of that. Should be good with Matt. Really appreciate Kevin Kugler coming back on, going through Fox Sports PR for that, getting Kevin's thoughts on the season. Wild USFL season right now. And, Todd Haley's yelling at, coaches on the sidelines, and we've, the Showboats cannot get their life together. But McLeod Bethel-Thompson is looking good. That is exciting. Really pumped to have Devion Smith on the program, courtesy of the Arlington Renegades. Really appreciate the team over there. And then Ben Grant, long time been trying to get Ben on, just figuring out a good spot with the Xs and Argos podcast. Getting back into the CFL here. I've been tremendously lazy with that during the XFL season. I know we've had Cody Fajardo, we had Rick Campbell and everyone from the BC Lions, but getting back into CFL coverage here now that training camps, rookies are reporting and everything else. Last thing for me before I go, if you're going to be in San Antonio next week, we are doing our big live show Saturday at 2 to 4, I think local time. So that's Central. Not going to be a Friday episode next week. We will be going live. Anthony Miller, Andy Murray, people calling in, everyone. I'm going to post the guest list. All the people you would expect. We're all going to do that. But if you are going to be in San Antonio, trying to get a guest count number going through the Alamo Saturday morning before the show. So I'm thinking at 10 a.m., we all go do the Alamo, that we can all go get lunch, do whatever. We're going to do the show 2 to 4. You can come hang out. You can go explore. I'll post the locations and all of that. And then the game's at 7. So that way we're not too stressed. We can go do the Alamo, whatever, hang out, go do the show, and then go hang out at the Alamo Dome. We will be around. I know that Jason with the X-Fan podcast, they're doing stuff on Friday night. I get in too late to be a part of the show, but I will be hanging out afterward as well. I'll be living on the Riverwalk every moment of the time that I am there, save for the XFL game. So come say hi. But if you want to be a part of the Alamo tour, send me an email, the markcastpodcast@gmail.com, or send me a DM right now. If you're listening to this, because I want to get a guest count, because I want to call them on Monday, we'll get a tour guide. I think it's $45. That includes the tour guide. Like, you got to pay to go to the Alamo anyway. So I think it's $45. I'll get a guest count, but send me an email or a DM right now. Just pause the episode. Hey, Reed, I'm in, just so I can get a guest count. I don't know if there's going to be 5 people there or 15 people, whatever. But if you're in San Antonio, Alamo tour, 10 a.m. Saturday. I know Haley with the Sea Dragons is going to be around. Maybe she will be there as well. Enjoy the episode. We'll see you at the end. Thanks. Well, we were joined earlier in the season by Matt Barrie. Now kind of a post recap, and we're still looking forward to the championship game. We have Matt Barrie back with ESPN. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, good being back with you. I can't believe we embarked on this 10-week journey plus a playoff, and here we are a couple of weeks away from the XFL championship. It's been a good run.
It's good. Yeah. So first off, if you had to grade kind of the XFL here, season inaugural kind of season 3.0, what would you say?
If I'm doing the 1 to 10 scale, I'd put it at a 10, and I'll put it at a 10 for a couple of reasons. One, it finished. You go back to 2020 when the pandemic through 5 games canceled the season, and I think we were all left wondering if this thing was going to be sustainable again. And so credit Danny and DJ and Jared Cardinal and the ownership group for putting the vision back onto the field and it finishing at a high level. I'll put it at 10 for that part one. Part two, I'll put it at a 10 because the quality of play week in and week out just got so much better. Week 1, week 2, week 3, we kind of knew it was going to be a little sloppy. These guys were coming off couches, hadn't played a lot. There's a training camp, so to speak, a long one or a preseason. But each week and each game we called, it got better and better. And then we started sitting in the booth. We're like, hell, man, we're watching some good football. And so I'd give it a 10 for that. And then the other reason I'd give it a 10, a lot of these cities bought in. A lot of them bought in. Everybody knows St. Louis and that story, DC and the Beer Snake. I called week 1 at San Antonio with St. Louis. That crowd was phenomenal. These cities bought into what these teams were doing. Even Houston this last weekend had a good crowd. And so you never know. Spring football leagues have had it tough. That's not a secret. And so the fact that we got in 10 games, the playoff, and now the championship, the fact that the quality of football improved, the fact that fans embraced it, and that the numbers all told were pretty good based on what you go up against in the spring, man. Right? I think it was a really, really good season.
Do you sense ESPN feels, because obviously, beginning of the season, okay, we do this partnership and hey, we're going to do all the TV, whatever. But then you go through year 1 here. Do you feel like they ESPN is bought in now that they're kind of getting this as well?
Look, I know that the game that I called Saturday, the South Division Championship between Arlington and Houston, that peaked at over 900,000 viewers. On a Saturday when there's a lot going on, you're going to run up against stuff in the spring. You're going to run up against the Masters. You're going to run up against big racing events, big fight events, NBA playoffs. You're going to run up against this stuff. It's just going to happen. And the fact that the numbers were still sustainable throughout, you got to hop around networks because we've got contractual agreements with other entities. It's just the way that it is. But I'll tell you this, from ESPN's perspective, to be able to do what we did from an access perspective, I'm telling you, man, like I say it probably every broadcast that I call, the transparency with officials and the Dean Blandino, to me, that is the best thing in sports. Because as fans, we sit at home and we want to know what in the hell the officials are talking about at midfield. Well, the XFL, you can. And the Dean Blandino angle, you can. With some of the rules that were put in place. I think ESPN could clip this off, go to other partners, leagues, SEC, NFL, Big 12, whoever you want to go to, and say, hey, you know what? Some of this stuff works. And it was very innovative TV. And I would say top to bottom, everybody's thrilled.
Yeah, the Dean Blandino is funny. We had him back on a couple weeks ago too, because he really, I can't decide if it's better or worse. Like if you disagree with the call or you think it's a bad call, but then it doesn't go your way. I don't know if hearing Dean makes it hurt any less as a fan, right? If it's like, oh, my guy got.
You know what? It's more of like the why. Like I want to know the why. And here's what I loved doing during the broadcast read. I loved doing. There was a couple of times. There was one this last week where we know there's the challenge everything rule. And we know that there's a lot of times it doesn't even get used in a game. There was one specific incident, I believe, was it roughing the passer that didn't get called? Something didn't get called and it wasn't challenged. I loved hitting Dean on that kind of stuff. Hey, Dean, that wasn't called on the field. Had one of the coaches challenged that, what would you have said? He's like, I would have called that a foul. And so even right there in the middle of a game, he's admitting that the crew missed something. I find that kind of thing fascinating when you're talking about a live sporting event.
If you now looking, we're going to crown the champion, all of that. Moving to next year, what would you want to see, or what would you think that they could do? Obviously this is, kind of a pseudo reboot, and we're wanting to get a foundation. What would you like to see happen before next year? I'll stay away from that one because it's so hard for me to know from an ownership perspective what they want. I know Danny, DJ, and Jerry are very passionate about this, and I know they made every decision they made for the good of the league. I think the product spoke for itself. I think they did what they had to do with the hub to get everybody the right quality of facility and care at a good cost because you have to. And so I think it's a startup. It's what it is, whether it's a startup. And so there's going to be things that you could pick and choose. And right now, the next thing I believe for the XFL is play the championship game May 13th in San Antonio between DC and Arlington. And then really, 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 really sell the amount of names that are going to be going off to the NFL. I've said it from day one. Well, can a spring league succeed? All these people talking about, well, yeah, you know how it can succeed when how many times have I said it this season? It's a league of opportunity, right? It's a league of second chance. Well, if these guys are starting to get NFL opportunities because of it, how much more popular does your league get? I firmly believe that if there's a player that's coming out of college and they're a 5th round pick, 6th round pick, 7th round pick, probably 6th or 7th, and there's just not a lot of good tape on him, I believe the XFL could eventually go to those kids right out of college. Hey, come play with us. You're still draft eligible. Come get you're a 6th round pick. Come be a 4th round pick. I think that's where this is headed. Because I'm telling you, in the next 2 weeks, you're going to hear a lot of names that we recognize from the XFL on NFL rosters. And to me, that's going to make the league jump to a different level. Well, we've already, even just right now before we got on, the XFL was posting, Ben DiNucci got an invite over to the Broncos camp. They just posted the whole list. I mean, you're already seeing that we haven't even crowned a champion yet.
Yeah, and there was rumors. There were some Saints rumors with DiNucci over the weekend. There was a lot of rumors about who's going where. Hakeem Butler is going to be back in the league. Tim Ward, he's a player that you got to watch. All the sack masters for Houston are going to be in the league. I mean, they're going to be guys that are going to be getting looks again because the tape they were put. The Jack Cohn is getting some interest. I'd be stunned if AJ McCarron doesn't get invited to a camp. A lot of these youngest, like if you're not a roster, how come you can't give 3 from Seattle a look? You know, how come you can't give him a legit? He's little, but he can move. I mean, there's a lot of these guys. So there's a lot of these guys that I believe are going to start getting looks in the NFL.
When I knew you were on the South Division game, I watched it. I was in DC for the North, and I was watching it at the bar there at the hotel. So I got to get Matt's thoughts of, how the hell did the Renegades, like, how did this happen? Because, we had the playoffs, and even Anthony Beck is tweeting, and he's upset, and, there are all these different weird playoff things. Renegades came in, they took care of business. What did you make?
So I'll peel back the curtain a little bit. We have our production meeting. We have one production meeting midweek for our crew. It'd be every Wednesday after I got done with Sports Center. We'd have a production meeting. We discuss kind of the storylines of the game. And we all candidly said, we're like, hey, look, man, it's hard to beat a team 3 times. We gave you the sports cliche within our group. And then Saturday morning, we have a production meeting prior to the game. We're sitting there having coffee. We're at a conference room at the hotel. We're going around the room. And the producer would just candidly ask, guys, what do you see happening tonight? Like, what are the storylines? And I think every single one of us in that room was like, I just don't see a way Arlington pulls this off. I just don't. Houston's defense is too tough. They're physical. They can run the ball, and the 2-headed quarterback with Silvers and McDonald. It's just going to be tough. I just don't see it happening. They've lost both games to this team by an average of 12.5 points, by at least 12.5 points. I know the Week 10 game was whatever, but it's the facts, right? So pregame, we were just kind of hoping for a close game just to get the viewers, just for the good of the product. We go to midfield before the game, and I just go to Stoops. I'm like, hey man, you guys gonna open it up today or what? And he and Galloway started laughing. And Stoops is like, man, we want to. We have to. We need to. And so it was almost as if start 4 for Luis Perez. It was almost as if he was due for a breakout game because the guy's smart. Chuck Long told us in our meetings that he's one of the smartest, if not the smartest quarterbacks that knows football than any quarterback he's ever been around. So the guy gets it. You just wonder how it was just so perfect. I mean, he played perfect football. Houston didn't get to him as much as I think they thought they would. And it was a game where you had to sit there and be like, all right, let's create a perfect start. Arlington goes down and scores. Then the defense holds. Then they're getting big plays. And Arlington's defense stepped up. Silvers was ineffective. McDonald comes in. And it was just really a perfect storm for the Renegades to get in there and pull off an upset. Because I think there were 7.5. By the time we kicked, they moved to 7.5-point favorites. Houston did. By the third quarter, it had flipped to Arlington 6.5, which means that's a 13-point change in the line just in 2 quarters of football.
It was almost speechless just kind of watching it. I don't know. I just don't think anyone, I don't know if it was them playing because they felt disrespected and with the standings and all that, if they just came out, I had Devion Smith on the show as well this week. And, he said, we hear all that, we hear people saying, hey, you don't deserve to belong there. Right.
But I mean, they were 4-6. I think they lost 4 of their last 5 games. I mean, there was no indication. I mean, let's be honest. If they're in the South, or if they're in the North, they're not in the playoffs. They're not even sniffing the playoffs. If they're not in the South, they're not in. That's just the facts of the division breakdown. They were fortunate. But what do you do with that opportunity when you get in? Had they got blown off the turf, then the people that said they didn't belong were going to have that argument and say, see, I told you so. But now that they won, I mean, it's a great story. I've got Bob Stoops on Sports Center with me on Thursday, and it's a great story. You've got a team that wasn't even 500. You got a quarterback traded midseason, and here they are playing for the championship.
Was it just Luis Perez? Were they just lacking that, like, we need someone that can adequately pass the ball?
That's all it was. They're off. I think going pre-Perez, weeks 1 through 7, I think they were averaging at like 13.3 points a game. And then since Perez jumped in there, they were well over 20. I mean, the offense had zero punch, none. And people wondered if week 4 was going to be that week where just everything clicked. And 3 for them was amazing. I mean, so many guys had big games for them. And on the other side of it, like Sal Cannella, where was guys that you would expect to have big games didn't. And so it was fun, man. It was a fun game to call because I don't think we expected it. In fact, I know we didn't expect it. And the more things developed, the more we were getting excited, like, hey, this could really happen.
In terms of them actually, Dragons did not look good against DC, and I don't know how much of the game you saw, obviously, with the weekend schedule. But do you think the Renegades have a chance here against the Defenders?
Yeah, I mean, if last week's team shows up, no question. I mean, they could score with anybody. I mean, DC's been the best team, I think, in the league, top to bottom, for the entire season. But there's no question. I think if Arlington plays the way they did, neutral site, Texas might favor them. Because they've got confidence. There's nothing scarier than a team that's told they can't do something. And that's what Arlington came into the postseason with, and they showed it last week, that against a team they'd lost to twice, not been competitive against twice, you go in and get the win. But DC, top to bottom, has been the best team. I was surprised by Seattle. I haven't been shy about my love for the Seattle roster, and that when they're clicking, and I legitimately thought they were the best team in the league. But it just goes to show you, like, that cliche, any given Sunday in football, any given Saturday in college, sometimes we saw it this weekend in the XFL.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably one of the best, if not one of the better, if not best games that Tanucci played. And, people just couldn't handle the ball. I mean, we were there and it was wet. It just wasn't, it just didn't feel like they got it all together. I don't know what the deal was.
That happens. I mean, same with Houston. I mean, there was sound of Bob Stoops shaking Wade Phillips' hand at the end of the game. And he was like, Stoops looked at him, was like, I don't know how this happened. And Wade's like, it was a perfect storm. We didn't play. Like, it's sports, man. Like, you just never know. There are weird things. Like, Perez could have just had this moment of clarity before the game where everything just slowed down for him. You just never know. And the fact that Silvers never got going for Houston, and AJ and them made that switch so quick, it was almost as if they were trying to play catch up to get in rhythm. Even though Cole, I thought, was great the week before, and it's like, hey, we found something in him. Cox, they found a running back that they loved. Allen, I mean, they had the guys. They could never figure it out.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out. We didn't have the audio at the bar, but I think Silvers was 3 of 6. It certainly wasn't a horrendous performance, but it seemed like they just went away from him so quick. I just couldn't figure out.
Yeah, it was quick. I mean, I think it was the first quarter. We never saw him again. It was clear that they were going to ride McDonald to see if they can get it going again.
But it just didn't seem. It doesn't seem like McDonald had nearly the accuracy that they needed. I don't know. Cole or Brandon is not the athlete I think that Cole is, but it just felt like Cole. They didn't have the right arm that day.
And keep in mind, like, Arlington's problem was their offense all season. I mean, the defense led the XFL in interceptions. I mean, they had a really good defense, but they had only scored 12 touchdowns all year going into the game, 5 of them through the air. So they were inept offensively until they got Luis Perez. You match that up with a pretty stout defense. Now you got a pretty good team.
I'm curious what Brandon Silver's next role, what does he do here? It didn't seem when I talked with him on the show this year that he was, I think he was just happy to be playing football and be winning. And I'm with AJ Smith. I'm kind of in a comfortable place, but I don't think kind of really being benched more or less in the playoff game is a big outing for, hey, you're going to go do great things here in the offseason.
That, I'll tell you, is the offseason storyline that I think everybody should watch. What to make of the guys that don't move on to the NFL. I mean, what do they make of this experience? How do they grow as football players? Are they coming back to their organizations? What are some of these coaches going to do? I think now that we're going to be out of it here in 2 weeks, I mean, it's a long off season. The season won't start again until February. So what is it? May. So June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January. I mean, you're talking 9 months, and a lot happens in a startup in 9 months to get it back to year 2. And so players like Silvers, like you mentioned, and some of the other ones, it'll be interesting to see if they say, look, I'm going to be an XFL football player. And I think that's okay. I think even DJ said it, like, this could be a league that people want to play in. Like, there's going to be guys that came from the NFL that want that opportunity, but then there's going to be guys that said, you know what? I'm going to be an XFL football player for 4 months a year, and that's going to be good.
Well, I think I think for the sustainability of the league, I think you have to. I mean, you can't have you have to eventually get, and you can do a year or two. I mean, even the CFL, no one, I would say vast majority of people don't dream in playing in the CFL, but once you go up there and you go, oh, I can live here and it's nice and I get paid and people like me and I'm on TV, like there's benefits to doing it.
Correct. And look, and if you just like playing football, you're gone not too long. It's a 10-game season. You make a decent amount of money. All your food and meals and hotels, everything are paid for during the season. So if you're wise with money, man, you can stack some cash 4 months a year, 3 months a year, go do something else, then come play ball again.
Any other wrap-up thoughts here? Any other final kind of takeaways?
I went into this thing open-minded when they asked if I wanted to do it coming off college football season. I was like, man, I'm exhausted. I just went through 16 weeks of college football, and I said, but you know what? I'm buying what Danny, DJ, and Cardinal are selling, and I wanted to see it. And I wanted to see these. I know these names from covering. I know these players. I know these coaches. And I wanted to see something succeed. And I'm glad I did it, man. I'm damn glad I did it because it was a fun run of a league that I believe, because of the buy-in, is only just beginning of what I think is going to be what we finally see with a successful spring football league.
It's just weird, you do so much college. Like, we have people all the time, and these guys online, just the random people, whatever. You track these guys all the way through in college, and I've watched them for years, and I watched them in the draft, and then if they don't go wherever, it's like, what? I'm never going to watch them again. I don't care. Like, I don't care watching them in the XFL. Like, don't you think that's weird that so many people track, hundreds of thousands of college players every year, and then they're playing in these leagues, and they couldn't care less about watching them?
And it's funny because I had the opposite reaction, because you're thinking like, well, what happened to Vic Beasley? No kidding. Vic Beasley's playing. He was an all-pro in 2016. Josh Gordon was the best of the position. Whatever happened to Josh Gordon? No kidding. He's playing in this, so I was always fascinated by it. I was always fascinated as a kid growing up. My favorite Sports Illustrated issue was the Where Are They Now? I always loved it. Because I followed all these guys in college. I want to know what they went up to, because NFL, man, you're here one day, you're gone the next. And so when you start hearing some of these names again, man, I think it's fascinating. And I would encourage everyone, if you're a football fan, you can gamble on it. I know that was big for them, sports betting. You get to follow these careers, because some are going to have a great comeback story, and some are just going to never live up to their potential and be really good XFL football players. And again, that's fine. But pro football is hard. It is really, really hard. And with that motto, Player 54, we just saw 8 teams filled with rosters of how hard it really is to make it to the top level.
Well, no, and I think more people need to be like you and adopt that mentality, right? Because it's so foreign to me. It's like, even the CFL, it's like, well, they're not in the NFL. I don't care. I don't want to, I have no interest in that. It's just weird.
Yeah, because the NFL's been so dominant for so long. I mean, it's the brand. But people will start learning. There's more out there. The G League and the NBA got some popularity. Look, there's a time and a place. You should see AA baseball stadiums in some of these towns. They're packed every night. Now, they don't get the TV audience because it's not a TV contract type thing, but there's stuff outside the big four. And I think that the sooner we learn to embrace that it's still a good product, the better off everybody will be.
Last question for me. I appreciate your time. What was, besides just obviously XFL succeeding and we're doing all this, whatever, AJ McCarron, DiNucci, what was the biggest storyline that you thought came out of the season that you'll remember?
Oh, there's a couple of them. Again, DiNucci you hit on, because I think he's an NFL caliber player. I think AJ showed what he's got. I think a guy like Reggie Barlow, DC head coach, he's going to be a coach, man. He's good. The stories for me, these guys that got opportunities, even our guy Anthony Becht, I mean, he's going to be a coach. These guys that got chances to chase their passion, Hines Ward, coaches were a big story. Even a guy like Prohl's kid. I mean, he's not big, but man, he's got fire. And so a lot of these guys that really had a chance to lead the league, Ja'Cour Pierce, I just mentioned him a while ago for Seattle. That kid's a stud. Like, where did he come from? Give him an opportunity. And so the guys that I expected to show out, a lot of them did, but the ones that you never heard of that became stars, that for me is what a great story is.
Well, Matt, I appreciate it fitting me in. Busy times here, and it's been fun listening all year. Yeah, I just kept thinking that whole night. So I got to know what Matt thought about the Renegades win. So I appreciate you, piquing my curiosity and whatever to come back on. So
no, man, I appreciate what you do for these leagues. And guys like you and your passion projects and getting this stuff out there. We need more of that. So anytime you want me on, I'm here for you, man. Great stuff from you all season.
Well, it's a big day when I pull out my Spring League Jousters jersey. Just a little throwback for my Spring League, man. We have Kevin Kugler here now, obviously with USFL and everything else. How are you, sir?
I am good. It harkens back to those good old days of the Spring League when we all enjoyed a little football in the offseason.
It was. I got to interview Luis Perez as well here finally now, obviously with the XFL, but it was cool to have the Jousters jersey on. Just a lot of memories and all the way back to 2020 with all this stuff.
Yeah, it was. And you know what? In 2020 especially, it was really good to have the Spring League because we were kind of craving extra sports at that point, and it kind of came along at a good time and filled in some gaps for us. And now we've got USFL, and it's clicking right along already moving along into week 4.
I know, it's exciting. So you were at the kickoff, in Memphis. We'll talk about that, kind of general thoughts, and then we can talk about your game this weekend, Birmingham at Pittsburgh. Thoughts? You're back for season 2. How's it feel?
It's good. I'm how excited I am and was about this last year, and I still am about this league. I really do think this league has so much potential, and I think we've seen it over the last couple of years. You see it in the television ratings. You see it in the people who are interested in this. There is an appetite outside of just you and me. There is an appetite for other football, and I think we've seen that throughout the course of the spring, throughout the course of the 2 years of the USFL, even to the Spring League. There are people who want to watch football. It's America's sport right now. No offense to my baseball friends, but it's America's sport. And if you can give us more football, we're going to watch it.
How did Fox, coming out of last year, going into this year, obviously we're doing the hub, more hubs now. I saw a lot more advertising, right? I mean, we had the infamous Super Bowl ad and kind of all that, but it seemed like last year, okay, we're kind of trying this out. Now we're really making a go for it.
Yeah, I think Fox has really gone all in with the USFL. I think you've seen the commitment from the amount of bells and whistles that we have on every broadcast, from the people who are putting on the broadcasts, the crew that we have behind the broadcast. I mean, we've really gone all in, not to sound like a company guy, but I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into each and every one of these broadcasts, from microphones to cameras to drones to, you name it, and we're trying it out on these USFL broadcasts. It was something we did last year, and we've been able to carry that over and even grow it a little bit this year. I love the technology in the football that shows where the first down line is, when we can zoom in on the graphic that shows through lasers how close this was or is to a first down. All of that stuff, I think, enhances the game. It enhances it for me as a broadcaster, and I think it enhances it for viewers too. I got to believe it's better for a viewer to know immediately just how close they are to either getting a first down or how just across the first down line they got. I think it's a really cool thing.
Well, what I like about it, and I noticed, turning on the first game, the Memphis game, I don't think anyone does football like Fox. I mean that, and just, whether if you didn't know any different, and I said on the show that week, you'd think it was in October and whatever. I mean, the broadcast looks good, sounds good. You guys are great on the call, the technology, there's something about Fox and the way that it puts it on air that I do think if you're hesitant and you're watching it, you feel a little bit more at home there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I'm totally biased, and I say this with all bias, but I agree with you. I mean, and how I know that is I see what's put into these broadcasts. I know what goes into an NFL broadcast because I do NFL during the fall, but I see what goes into these USFL broadcasts, and it's cameras, microphone, everything that you would put into an NFL, a big-time NFL broadcast, goes into each and every one of these USFL broadcasts. The level of commitment that Fox has had to making this work is pretty remarkable.
So obviously you in Memphis, what was that like? You know, that was the early hub announcement. Then obviously we had Michigan over the weekend in Canton, but it seems like a lot of efforts being put into the showboats, kind of revitalizing that. What do you make of all that?
You know what? It's funny. We were driving in that day to the game and going through the parking lot, and there's tailgaters out there. And it's a little thing, but you're thinking, well, this is kind of cool. People are excited about this. People want to see this. In the original incarnation of the USFL, the Memphis Showboats drew very well. They had a lot of interest. People were excited about them. Obviously, they had Reggie White leading their team at that point. No one really knew that Reggie White was going to become Hall of Famer and legend Reggie White as his career went on. But there was excitement for it then, and there's excitement for it now. The key to this is you find markets, in my opinion, that are hungry for football, and you provide them football. You see it in Birmingham. We saw last year Birmingham hungry for football. They love football. We all know that about Alabama. So you provide it to them, and they come out. Memphis is the same way. They love football. They love to have a team, and I think you've seen that in the early going. They're going to support this Showboats team, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, what do you make of the Showboats so far? Kind of off to a rough start. We obviously Todd Haley, with the Bandits. Now we're moving over, and he was getting a little flustered here at the end of the. I saw that going viral. So, what are you making of the Todd Haley Showboats?
Yeah, certainly a little frustration has started to show, and that'll happen with any team that starts off 0-3. One of the struggles that they've had is they can't get a run game started, and we saw it again last week. Cole Kelly performed admirably, over 300 yards passing in the loss. But when you can't establish the run, I don't care where you're playing, high school football, college football, professional football, it doesn't matter. If you can't get a run game going and you become one-dimensional, it's really tough. And you can see that frustration. And Todd Haley's a great coach and a great offensive mind. And when you can't get both facets of that offense going, it can be a little bit frustrating.
Well, because it's weird because here, you have – we obviously Todd Haley kind of carried over from last year, but here, we see the Breakers, they're undefeated, and obviously they have McLeod Bethel-Thompson. That's kind of, I think, a cheat code a little bit here coming in, and we've tracked him for years, and it's, you know him all the way back to the Hughes of the Aviators, whatever they were calling it back at that time. I guess first off, what do you think of McLeod? Because obviously you watched him play years ago.
Yeah, what's funny is you see him play and you realize he's the same guy. I mean, he's 34 years old now. He's been at almost every level of football that you can imagine. And I think it's a great story. It's a story that as the Breakers continue to win, it's going to get bigger and bigger. I mean, what more do you want? You've got a 34-year-old quarterback who has been everywhere and has performed everywhere, now performing in this league. Oh, by the way, his partner is a writer for a Marvel show that's going to be a huge hit in Ironheart. You've got this great pairing. You've got a team that's unbeaten. You have the story of John D. Filippo, which is an amazing, emotional story of a man showing resilience and coming back to coach the game he loves, surrounded by the leaders in the league in almost every category. It's a really cool story. And I think as this season goes along, and if the Breakers can continue to play like we saw this past week against Birmingham, you're going to see this Breakers team and that story of McLeod Bethel-Thompson grow bigger and bigger and bigger across the country.
Yeah, I don't want to, it's not really good now to call maybe Tom and Giselle, but it really, maybe at the time, like MBT really, they're kind of the power couple here. I think it's great for the league. And I said this because obviously we cover CFL as well. Like, whatever circumstances made him come and to be closer to the family and all of that, it looks good for the USFL to be able to compete with a high-level talent that way to get him to come in.
Oh, there is no doubt about it. If you can have that kind of – because here's – you and I have talked about this before. What this league is all about to me in part is stories. Because you need to when I'm on an NFL game on a Sunday in October, I don't have to introduce the audience to Patrick Mahomes. Everybody knows who Patrick Mahomes is. There's stories to tell, but it's not the who is this person that I have to tell. You have to do that with all of these guys. Who's Wes Hills? I have to tell you the story of who Wes Hills is. Who's Sage Surratt? Who's McLeod Bethel-Thompson? You and I know who he is. We watched him play in the early days, but not everybody has. So that's what's cool about this league to me. Not only the football and the chance to see football and to see these guys realize their dreams of playing professional football, but the chance to tell the story of these folks to a larger audience. And to me, that's what it's all about. It's a great league to tell stories, and it's a great league for innovation. And I think when you marry the two, the innovation that we have on the broadcast and the stories, you can really have some cool stuff happen.
Yeah, so McLeod coming in, right, and you have John DeFilippo. I thought that was tremendous too, and him, being able to run out in the field and all of that. You have someone like him finding success, and obviously Todd Haley, who's been through this before. I always think, we've seen like Bart Andrus, like people that have done the spring league system or have done the, whatever the alt football circuit are able to get up to speed a little bit more. I mean, what do you make of Todd, besides the run game, like some of these new coaches or returning coaches, struggling to find success here?
I think one of the reasons why you see that is I think the league's better this year. I think it's a better coached league from top to bottom. I think it's a more balanced league from top to bottom. I mean, I think Birmingham is outstanding. They were outstanding last year. They allowed 45 points. I mean, this is a better league this year. Skip Holtz hasn't gotten any worse as a coach. I just think you've seen improvement. I mean, we haven't even talked about, and I know we will, but we haven't talked about what Mike Nolan's done with the Michigan Panthers so far. I think I've been as impressed with that as I have been with everything else. I mean, this is a team that at times last year really struggled to generate anything. And Mike Nolan has that team energized. And what's been cool to see is how energized Mike Nolan is by this opportunity. We sometimes look at this as, oh, this is for players. This is for players. This is for coaches too. John DeFilippo, Mike Nolan, who has been a head coach at the highest level, San Francisco 49ers, was a defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys just 3 years ago. The energy he has about coaching in this league, it is palpable when you talk to him. When you watch him, you can see it. He's excited about being here. So I think it's a league not only for great player stories, but for coaching stories. And I think this league has a better story to tell this year from a coaching standpoint, top to bottom.
Well, I think people are realizing it's a pretty good gig, right? You come in here, you don't have to do the NFL. This is my entire life for 12 months. And I'm not like, you're able to come in, really get invested, kind of stop down, do it. We got the hub situation now. It's a little bit better. You think the league has done more to kind of entice to get some bigger names in?
I think, and I give Daryl Johnson a lot of credit for this, my colleague at Fox on Sundays in the NFL season, but he manages a lot of what's going on with the USFL right now. And I think he's done a really good job of talking to people, working with people, getting them interested in this league and getting them interested in telling the story of the USFL and helping out these guys at their core. And I've never found a coach who would say anything different. At their core, no matter where they coach, all coaches want to do is help players get better, help players achieve their goals. It's why you get into coaching in the first place. And I think you've been able to sell that to coaches who are like, look, maybe you've gone through the NFL ringer. Maybe you don't want to go back to the NFL. Maybe you don't have an opportunity to go back to the NFL, but you still want to be involved. You still want to coach. Come coach here. Come help these guys achieve their goals. There's a reason why everybody is in the USFL right now. And one of the big reasons is they want a chance to go to the NFL. They want a chance to play at the very highest level of professional football. And this is a great opportunity for them to do it. And it's a great opportunity for a coach to help them get to that level. And that's at their core, that's all a coach wants to do is help those players.
How, and we don't need to talk too much about the other league, but how much is having Fox on, and we've talked in the past, but now, going into year 2, we've got Daryl Johnston, we're in, and you're on Fox, we're in all the NFL, like being able to kind of bridge that gap for the USFL, like you said, for coaches, for staff, for players, for everything else.
Well, it goes back to the core of what Fox has been since I've been there. And it's one of the first things I heard when I joined Fox NFL. And what they've always said is Fox is football. That's been the mantra of Fox for as long as I can remember. Fox is football. And so for Fox, this is just an extension of the mission. Fox does a lot of different sports, NASCAR, baseball, basketball. We do a lot of different things. But at its core, Fox is football. Fox is NFL. Fox is USFL. And that marriage now allows Fox to just continue to grow that brand over the course of an entire year. It's been a natural progression for a network to be able to be involved as they are with the USFL, to just kind of extend that and have that football as a bridge. Because now you've got this all the way through late June, early July. And then before you know it, we're preseason football in the NFL again. So Fox being football means Fox is football almost all year round now, and I think it's fun.
It is cool. I've gotten a lot more into watching like Undisputed and stuff, and it is. I do like it. You feel like you have some synergy there. I don't know. I was never really the biggest Skip and Shannon fan, so I've really gotten into it with the downfall of the Cowboys and kind of watching Skip grind on. So it's been fun. It does feel like there's kind of a the world exists there across all the different properties. So.
And they've done a really good job of marrying everything together. You saw Michael Strahan, you saw Howie Long doing commercials for the league in the preseason. You see those guys tweeting about it all the time. You see that marriage with the shows. I mean, it really has been a great ability to take the brand of the USFL and put it all across the Fox brand. And really, that's been a big part of helping the league grow and helping the league sustain from year one to year two.
Did you like that commercial that don't accept any alternatives, no Hollywood knockoffs?
I thought it was clever. I did. I mean, it was clear what the point of it was. But anything you can do to grow the sport and give us football junkies more opportunities to watch football, I'm a fan of. So let's go. Let's have some great spring football all the way around.
In terms of, so you're going to be at the Birmingham Maulers game. Birmingham lost this week, but crazy shootout. McLeod put up 1 million points. Last year we had Magoo go down. Jamar comes in this year. Jamar goes down. Magoo. Must be nice to have two just stunning quarterbacks there come in. What do you make of the Stallions through 3 weeks?
You know what? I do think the Stallions are an excellent football team, and I don't think you take anything away from what happened last week, because I think the Breakers are hitting on all cylinders right now. And I'm already looking ahead. I don't want to blow through my schedule, but week 7, I've got that rematch game on my card with Birmingham and New Orleans, and I'm already looking forward to that, because honestly, that could be for the South Division title when you look at the way this thing is shaping up right now. So I'm kind of fired up for that one down the road. But this will be my first chance to see Birmingham in person this year. One of the things that is the question I have was what we saw from the defense of Birmingham, New Orleans, or is it something that you need to be concerned about with Birmingham? I'm more on the side of its New Orleans strength versus Birmingham weakness. I mean, they didn't give up any offensive points the week before against Memphis, so I'm not exactly looking at this and saying, oh, let's push the panic button. Birmingham, the champs, are in trouble. But I do think that the league is stronger, and that's going to give Birmingham more cause for pause during the course of the year. And look, I don't know what to make of Pittsburgh yet. I really don't. They hadn't scored an offensive touchdown for like 25 or 26 drives, and they finally get the touchdown, and then they get the win over a team that I think is very good in the Philadelphia Stars. So they've got to be better in the red zone. That's been a real problem for Pittsburgh all season long. But I do think they have some pieces. I do think they're a better team than we saw last year. But I don't know how much that's going to translate against a Birmingham team that I would guess is going to be a little bit frustrated with what happened to them last week.
Yeah, Bailey Gaither was kind of one of the really standouts of any of the Maulers last year. We didn't see a lot of that. So it was no surprise to kind of see him get the touchdown. I had the game on there getting ready for I was in DC. You have a new coach in Pittsburgh. It feels like they have some of the same issues as before. I mean, they just can't seem to get out of their way, it seems like.
Yeah, and they're not a dynamic team yet. I'm hoping that develops as the season goes along, but through 3 weeks, we haven't seen any sort of dynamic, multi-dimension offense. I'm hoping that continues to develop. I think it'll be good for the league if we can get the bottom part to grow a little bit more. But, that was kind of the problem we had with Pittsburgh last year, too, is that they just weren't able to ever get anything consistent generated on the offensive side. And we've seen the same thing in the early stages of this season. I mean, look, when you're not scoring a touchdown through your first 25 or 26 drives, that's a problem. In this league, especially when points can come in a hurry, that's a concern. And if you're Pittsburgh, you feel good because that's a really good win against a good football team in Philadelphia. But you've got to find more consistency on offense if you're going to knock off teams like Birmingham this weekend.
We talked a little bit about the Panthers. Obviously, they had their home debut. They had the early game, and then they were kind of in the primetime slot. I saw a lot of coverage. It seemed like a lot of the Detroit media came out for that. What do you just make of Michigan? We're trying to make Detroit and kind of this hub go.
I like what Mike Nolan has done. I think he's brought an energy to this team, and I think Detroit is one of those markets that is going to support a football team again. I mean, look, there's a lot of buzz in Detroit for the Lions. We all know that they're probably going to be the favorites in their division for the first time in a generation when the new season starts in the fall. So there's already some excitement building for football in the state of Michigan. Obviously, we know Michigan State always bring up there. I do think there's room for the Panthers to have some success and draw fans out like we saw this past weekend at Ford Field. It's going to be interesting to see if they can build a little momentum. They've got Memphis coming up. They've got Pittsburgh coming up. There's a chance for this Michigan team to be maybe 4-1 after 5 games. Well, that's going to generate a lot of noise in that area, and I think you'll really start to see people coming out. Now, they've got the back half of the schedule that's not loaded friendly for them, so we'll see if they're legit when we get to the last 5 weeks. I think they've got New Orleans. I think they've got Birmingham. I think they've got Jersey in there. So you're going to have some challenges, but Michigan's got a chance early to make some noise and really build that fan base up there.
Yeah, it's just hard. It's the same with Memphis. You can't, you want to get these new, we've seen it, in the other leagues and stuff, like you got to kind of win to get the people out there, especially if you're trying to get people to buy in kind of initially here, at the start.
Yeah, and I think that's what's been so encouraging for Michigan is you've got a coach everybody knows in Mike Nolan. You do have some players. I mean, you and I saw Reggie Corbin last year, and he was fantastic for most of the season. He didn't really have a great game this past time out, but we've seen him. He's very dynamic, as we heard a couple of weeks ago on the sidelines. Reggie's an exciting player to watch and to listen to, and we'll see if this is a team that can generate some of that going on forward. They do have a conducive schedule to that over the next 2 weeks, and I would love to see it because I've spent a lot of time in Michigan doing work for the Big Ten and obviously covering the NFC for Fox, and folks up there love football. They're going to come out, especially if this team is 4-1. That's going to generate some excitement around there.
Are you finding more of your colleagues and maybe people just in the industry more interested now that we've hit year 2 of the USFL? Did that help getting over that hurdle?
I think it did. It adds credibility to any league that can come back. I mean, it's a simple statement, but it's the truth. It just doesn't happen very often. And we know the pandemic derailed some of this stuff initially, and maybe leagues would have been back then. But the truth of the matter is the USFL is the first one to really sustain from year 1 to year 2. And we're already talking about year 3. So I'm excited to see what comes down the road, assuming that we continue this path with the USFL, which I don't see any reason why we wouldn't. This is something that has been built to sustain, and you can't ignore it at this point. I mean, it's on broadcast television at least half the season. It's all over the map on the Fox shows. It's got a lot of high-profile players. And, again, you're going to see a lot of these guys dotting the roster of training camps for the NFL coming up in July and August once this league is done. We saw it last year. We saw some guys stick and make an impact. I think you'll see it again this year with a lot of these guys from these rosters who are going to have a chance once again after a second year of this league to make it to the next level.
Yeah, I think it's just, and rounding out here, I'll let you go soon, I promise. I just, seeing where Fox positioned a lot of the broadcasts this year spoke to me as like, we have confidence in this going into the year, right? Where, and it's hard the first year, and we're kind of trying to make it fit, but given NBC windows, Fox giving them 1 or 2 windows every weekend, obviously you're still going to compete on USA and all of that. But to me, it spoke like, hey, we want to put this in the position to succeed.
No, there's no question. I mean, I've been in the meetings and in the conversations. The commitment to it is full on. From Eric Shanks all the way down. This is a product that Fox believes in and is fully supported. And I look at my schedule coming up, and I mean, Fox. Everywhere I look, I'm on Fox doing these games in big time windows that are normally reserved for the NFL in the regular season in the fall, windows that are in prime time. We're in prime time this past weekend. I mean, this is something that they've really committed to. I'm proud of them for that. I think that's the way you make a league successful, is by fully committing to it and showing that it's important to you and showing to your fans that it's an important thing that they should be paying attention to. And, look, you and I are football junkies. Maybe we're outside the norm of this. There aren't a lot of people that can remember watching the Mega Bowl. That I was there for the Mega Bowl. You watched the Mega Bowl. It's not something that, everybody is a part of, but for people who love football, this is a great thing to spend some time with.
Yeah, the Mega Bowl it lives in lore of spring football. Never forget the Mega Bowl. RIP for that. Well, Kevin, I appreciate it. You made the connection years ago through everything with TSL, and I appreciate you continuing to come back on. And now it's it's awesome. And I see you on Fox on the weekends, and I'm like, I know there's Kevin. So you walk around. I appreciate your time and always making time to come on the show. It's appreciated.
No, I always enjoy coming on the show with you. I know you love football, and it's always a good chat. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks. Well, I'm thrilled. I've been trying to get this gentleman on since the beginning of the season. Now we have the Southern, XFL division champions here. Devan Smith, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm good. Exciting game here. We've been covering this for weeks and the playoffs and everything else. What did you feel like going in underdogs here? Everyone's complaining about the playoff standings. You guys win anyway. You're going to the championship.
A lot of people doubted us. We knew going in that week we had a great week of practice. We put pads on. We were so locked in as a team. There was no way we were coming out that game without a win, really.
What's it been like with Coach Stoops this season?
It's been pretty cool, fellow Youngstown guy, close to home. He's been pretty good coach. It was my first time ever being coached by him, so it's definitely been a learning experience, but overall, I have enjoyed it.
Overall, experiences with XFL, has it been good?
Yeah, it's been pretty good. They definitely know how to take care of their players. They take care of us. They take care of us to make sure everybody's taken care of on and off the field, really. So I have no complaints, really.
Take care. Make sure you get the food you guys want, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good. I hope you guys celebrated with some pizza after the championship game.
I might do it. I saw something on Twitter the other day. It says, I hope he celebrates with a slice of pizza. So,
do you like still being known for that as one of the things, or are you kind of over that?
I'm kind of over it to a certain extent, but it definitely keeps a chip on my shoulder because the team missed out on me, my leadership, and me as a player. So it kind of motivates me still.
So we were in DC for the North game. I watched every snap of the South Division Championship game there, along with some people from ESPN. What did it finally mean you guys were able to put everything together? I mean, it was just a dominant performance start to finish.
Well, honestly, I don't think we've put everything together just yet. I mean, in that second half, we only scored 3 points. So I mean, we still got a lot of work to do. But that first half, it felt good. It looked good. I mean, we know what we're capable of offensively and defensively. So it was a good way to start. But we got some work to do before this game, really.
You've been dominant all season. For you, if you had to grade your performance, how has it been?
Overall, the season?
Yeah.
I started off slow, I think, in my personal opinion. I haven't touched the field in almost 3 years, 2.5, something like that. I felt like I should have been a lot better than what I was at the beginning of the season, but I'm starting to pick up where I left off in the 2020 XFL season.
Biggest changes from that to now? What have you noticed?
As far as my performance?
It's just as far as the league goes.
I think the biggest change is us. Just, I mean, as far as my team, I don't know about everybody else and within the XFL, but as far as my team, we just kept believing, listening to our coaches, take the coaching properly, and taking it one day at a time. I mean, this is our first time being together as a team. You know what I mean? Like, this is our first time being together, coming together as a team. So we had to get used to each other.
In terms of mid-season, we've had Luis Perez join. He's a friend of the show. We talked with him back when he was with the Vipers. What has it been like having Luis? Has that opened up you guys being able to rush more as he's a little bit more of a legitimate passer than maybe some of the options that you guys had before?
No, I mean, really, Luis just came in and took control, man, and the team trusts him. He's softly spoken, but when he speaks, everybody's listening. He's a leader. I think he just took control of the offense, and everybody just was with it. I mean, we had no other choice at that point. You know what I mean? So we all believed in him when he got a shot, and he proved it's all right.
You guys put up a fight against DC earlier this season, but the offense, struggled a little bit. Seeing their aggressiveness now firsthand, do you feel like you're going to be more prepared for everything they're going to be throwing at you guys?
Well, you never know. You got 2 weeks to prepare for a team, so they could throw anything at you. But we are practicing what we saw previous game, and I know they're going to probably throw some new wrinkles into their defense. So I mean, all we can do is prepare for what we know and kind of guess what they're going to bring. But we're ready for anything.
Just having the extra bye week here, is that good, bad? What do you feel about that?
I'm happy about it. I get to rest my body a little bit. I don't have to bang into many people. You know what I mean? But no, I think it'll be good for both teams. Just make sure everybody's good and healthy because this is our last game. It's the most important game, the championship, and we need everybody to be out there 100% locked in and focused, really. So it gets us a little bit of time to debrief and do what we need to do to get focused on this game.
What does it mean for you to be able to compete here? First season XFL championship, to be in that game. We'll be at San Antonio. We'll be covering everything. What does it feel like for you to be a part of that?
I'm honored. Luis preached last week. Big time players show up in big time games. So I'm ready for it. This is really my first football championship I've been a part of since I think Little League. So definitely motivated, and hopefully we go out there and put on a show for you guys, really.
No, I'm excited. I think it's good. They've shared the photos, right? We've tweeted out the photos. Have you seen the championship trophy in person? Have you seen the photos? What do you think of the trophy?
I like it. I've seen the photos. I haven't seen it in person, but I like the trophy. I like the design of it. Hopefully on, what is that, Saturday we play, I believe? Yeah. Hopefully we're holding that over our heads. You know what I mean? I'll get up and close and personal with it. Might give it a little kiss.
That would be good. There was, we talked a little bit about kind of the disrespect against you guys just because of the record here. How much is that a motivator going into the championship game? Because we had heard that from some players and online, and that it was something kind of in the locker room, a little bit bulletin board material. Well,
no, for sure. Teams don't really respect us. They still, to this day, they think we got lucky. It definitely adds motivation because people don't really want us in the championship because they think it's going to be a blowout, but we're going to go out there and prove all those people wrong.
Coming full circle here with 2020 and cancellation, everything else, we're back here. You're in the championship game. How does that feel just to come full circle for all of this?
It feels good, man. Job's not done yet, but it feels good. It feels good. That's the best way I can say it. I don't know. I know my team and everybody's excited, but we still got one more game, and after that game, we can celebrate. I don't even know if you even noticed, but if you look at me when we won the Houston game, I was happy, but I really wasn't smiling because I knew we still had work to do.
Yeah, because this is a long time coming for all of us. Certainly you guys and working your ass off and being all that, but everybody going through this whole process. It's just been a tremendously long time to think here. However many years later, we're finally putting up we're actually going to be playing the championship game here coming up in 2 weeks.
It's hard to believe, man. Going from 2020, this is my first time being in a league or a spring league where something didn't happen. So let's cross our fingers. Hopefully we get to this game. I know we will, but just you never know what can happen. So for me, it's a pretty exciting feeling, and can't wait for it, really.
We've heard a lot from, about how having Chairwoman Garcia around and motivating and league ownership and management and obviously Russ Brandon and everyone else and DJ. Is that true? Do you buy into that and having them feel like they're invested and feeling as though, you're kind of carrying on that chip on the shoulder that The Rock has and everything else? Do you buy into that?
Yeah, I definitely do. I know this league right now hopefully is doing a lot better than the other league. I don't even want to bring up. But no, the ownership, man, they're fully invested in their players. They believe in every single one of us, or they wouldn't have us here, really. They show up to games, and it's not like they're just in the press box. Oh, I show up, now I'm leaving. Now they're fully invested. So it's pretty cool having owners like that. You know what I mean? You get up close and personal with them and touch shoulders with them.
We have a lot of listeners, listener Jenna, longtime big fans of the Renegades here, never doubted you guys during the whole season. What would be your message to them before I let you go, just about, kind of the ride or dies here that never, losing record and everything else, and always said you guys were going to wind up here in the championship?
Gotta believe, man. Just know we're coming. We're not we're not going out there to lose. You know what I mean? We're playing with a chip on our shoulders. Everybody is expecting us to lose. So, just keep believing, and we got you.
Well, we will be there. I was, saw my Sea Dragons get embarrassed here, a little embarrassed with the Defenders here over the weekend. So you will have my vote here going into the championship game. Devian, I really appreciate your time today coming on after practice and everything else. So thanks so much.
No problem. Appreciate you.
Well, I'm excited to finally make this connection. I've been trying to, figure out how do we get Ben Grant on here with the Xs and Argos podcast. I also feel like I'm such a hypocrite. I haven't had enough CFL content lately. So we are here. The CFL draft happened this week, and we have Ben here to talk about it. Ben, how are you doing?
I'm great, and I'm glad we could finally get together. So it's been a long time coming. So here we go.
In an alternate world, I had humored doing some sort of CFL live draft show, and then I ended up going to DC for the XFL playoffs. And then the Kraken were in, game one last night against you. Are you not a Leafs fan? Because the Leafs were playing the Panthers.
Well, yesterday was supposed to be my first day of returning as a Leafs fan, because I swore about 10 years ago, I'm done. I've had my heart broken too many times. When they get to the second round, I'm back in. And so yesterday, this was supposed to be, my rebirth as a Leafs fan, but I didn't watch a second of the game, obviously, because we had the CFL draft. So that prioritized my TV viewing and other responsibilities, of course.
That's good. Yeah, no, Kraken there with an exciting 5-4 overtime victory against Dallas. We'll see. First, we're going to talk CFL draft. Ben also has been watching the USFL because obviously McLeod Bethel-Thompson down in that. I am a noted supposed USFL hater, so you don't need to worry about being too critical on the podcast. But, as someone that's watched the CFL forever, I'm just kind of curious, what do you make of everything USFL with the Breakers?
First of all, I think it's exciting football, and it upsets me sometimes to see some USFL and XFL hate sometimes coming from CFL fans, because it just seems it's just sort of ironic because they spend so much time defending themselves from CFL haters, and there's plenty of those around here, unfortunately. And I don't know why we can't just all love football. I feel like that would be a great thing. Like I watch NFL, I watch CFL, I watch XFL, I watch USFL, like whatever. If it's football, if I'm driving down the road and I pass by a Pop Warner game, I'll get out of the car and watch for a little bit. It's football. So I don't know why there can't be more of that attitude, but that's where I wanted to start. Was I don't know why every time I post a USFL tweet, everyone that responds is like, the USFL is garbage. This football is so bad. And it's not. It's really entertaining football. Now, I do think the CFL is a higher level of football, but not across the board, not every position, not every spot. And regardless of that, the USFL is highly entertaining football. So I've really enjoyed watching that because it's pretty new for me. A lot of those players are pretty new. I know a couple of the guys on the Breakers, a couple of former CFL guys like Wes Hills, and obviously McLeod Bethel-Thompson. That's really who I'm watching. But yeah, I've been really entertained. Now, part of it is too that the Breakers are a fun team to watch. So it's not necessarily every game is like a Breakers game, but man, those games all come down to the wire.
Well, that's the thing. And, we had gotten into it as well with the XFL because, I kind of defend, I'll always defend the XFL against the CFL or whatever we got to do if we get, we get the Marshall Fergusons of the world, poo-pooing on the XFL. But, like CFL, not that the XFL and USFL are not like real football leagues, but the CFL, like we have real like proper training camps and like we're rolling in and months of kind of like onboarding, and rookies are starting next week here. Like you got to remember, like the USFL guys have been together like 3 or 4 weeks. Like they're just trying to figure out like what the hell are we got? Like can we not get injured here the first couple of weeks while we're trying to get up to speed?
Yeah, and you see that reflected, especially in those first couple of games where O-lines had a lot of trouble. The protection was not there because that takes time. It takes a lot of time to gel. And even with the CFL schedule, like they spend a lot of time in camp. You have a couple preseason games, but even that, you have the first few weeks of the season where DBs have busts all over the place in coverage. It's complex stuff. And yeah, everyone's played football. Well, most of them have played their whole lives, but this is not easy stuff that you're doing. The relationship that you have with the guy next to you is so much more important. I always find there are almost sort of prudent military ties sometimes when people talk about the brotherhood and the trust that you have in the game of football. It's rare in life to find a situation where the guy next to you is responsible for your safety and you're responsible for his. It doesn't come up a lot. And I think that's why you see a lot of military crossover, and there are some obvious similarities between the two as well. But there's that, when you don't have that trust there, when you don't for sure 100% know, I know he's got my back no matter what. If I'm not feeling that, then I can't do my job properly, and he can't do his properly. And so the first few weeks are kind of that feeling out process until you have this trust in each other. So yeah, that's. I think all levels of football early on, but you really see that in a league without a longer camp and a longer prep period.
McLeod had the best game so far, right? And I think it was like 40, whatever, to 30. I saw highlights. I was flying to DC for the XFL stuff. I had seen all this. Oh, McLeod should just come in here and run circles around everybody because the CFL is so much better. Like, what do you make of the success he's had? Is it just he's been around so long? He's obviously older than a lot of the players. Anyway, what do you attribute his success?
He's a different quarterback than he was a few years ago. So we can start there. Like if you put the 2018 McLeod Bethel-Thompson on the Breakers, they're not undefeated right now. He really changed in the last few seasons. And I think the biggest lessons he learned, there were sort of 2 lights that went on for him. One was and I've mentioned this a few times over the years, but I remember breaking down a game that he played against the Alouettes in 2019, a meaningless game for the Argos. They had a terrible season. Nothing was going right. But in the middle of that game, something clicked for him. And he started to, we've heard the things started to slow down a little bit. We've heard that in all sports. It seemed you could actually sort of see it there with him. And Montreal was throwing so much at him. They had 11 defensive back blitzes that game. They were all over the place with exotic pressure looks, which normally was death for him. He held the ball too long. He was always taking too long to figure out what he was looking at. And in that game, the light went on. And from then on, he was a little bit better. And then the second difference was in 2021, where he decided, I'm just not going to throw picks anymore. And it wasn't, I think every quarterback says that, but he decided that if he wasn't sure, he would hold on to it. And if he's got to take a sack, he's got to take a sack, but he's not going to turn the ball over, especially in the red zone. And in 2022, in the red zone, 15 TDs, 1 pick. Astonishingly good numbers from a quarterback who back in 2018, 2019, threw interceptions in the red zone a lot. So those 2 changes were huge for him. And it's just a maturity. And like you said, all these young guys they're playing the USFL, this is new and they're making those rookie mistakes and he's just not. And in that first half of the first game, he took a lot of sacks, took a lot of hits because the O-line wasn't quite gelling, but he was going to do that as opposed to put the ball in harm's way. And so I think that's a lot of it. And he's just this, wily veteran back there reading coverages. He knows exactly what he's looking at. Most of the time it seems to be cover 2. He's looking at a lot of really simple coverages and he knows exactly what to do with it.
Do you think that And the first thing I turned on, I think it was his first game, and Kurt was making fun of, McLeod threw the ball over the line of scrimmage because he was scrambling. Like, maybe he's playing in the metric system or whatever. But like, I don't like that, right? Because that's when we talk about people hating on, like, that is the people you need to get mad at, making fun of Canadians or whatever playing. But do you think McLeod succeeding, will that draw eyes to the CFL? Like, is there enough connection there for USFL fans to look up?
I don't really think so. Like it's unfortunate. I wish that happened. I think we talk very optimistically sometimes, like that is a thing, but I don't really think it is. It's not like USFL fans don't know the CFL exists. Everyone's aware of all of these leagues. And I think if people wanted to watch badly enough, they'd already be watching by now. That's not to say there aren't things that leagues can do to grow and to introduce themselves to new audiences. But I think if you're watching the USFL, you're already open to another brand of football. And so seeing a guy come in and this guy played in the CFL. Well, they've seen NFLers who played in the CFL before too. So I don't think that's necessarily going to draw more viewership. Maybe a few, but I don't think it's going to make a tangible difference.
Well, that's what goes exactly back to kind of our argument of CFL fans. Like, we are all these people that embrace all of these alternative leagues. And so you would think that there would at least be love between all of the non-NFL entities, between all of us.
You would think.
But it doesn't. You would be surprised. There's a lot of USFL fans that do not like the XFL, and there's a lot of XFL fans that do not like the USFL.
I've seen that too, and again, I don't get it. Like, you just love football. Watch the Japanese X League. That's great football, or at least it's highly entertaining football. It's not always the same thing, but yeah, those games are amazing. So yeah, I don't get that, and especially between two leagues that you can turn on your TV and see, like USFL, XFL. I don't know why. If you're a fan of one, you should be a fan of both.
So here we're talking draft, and we've now been doing the CFL. I think this is kind of our third season going into all of this. Does the CFL draft matter? I hear every year 100 different opinions of it doesn't matter at all, or it matters a lot. So you spend a lot of time tracking this. I know this for your podcast. So obviously you think it matters, but what is the general consensus of this?
I think it should matter. I'm so disappointed when I see numbers like how many starts draft picks beyond the second round have had over the last 5 years, for any given team, or what percentage of players are still on the team that drafted them 4 years later. And it's really low, and it's really sad. I don't think it has to be like that. And I think one of the things, the reason that the CFL draft really should matter, you look at the Toronto Argonauts as the Grey Cup champions from last season. Well, what did they have going for them? Did they have the best quarterback in the league? No. Did they have the best anything in the league? Not really. A couple positions, maybe you could argue. They had a really good team, but mostly they had real contributors who were Canadians, guys that were draft picks, not necessarily all Argos draft picks, although some, but the strength of their core in building up Canadians who are not just not a weakness, but actually a strength, actually contributing for you, is a huge advantage. You can find American players. There are a billion American DBs who are excellent football players, American running backs. You find them all over the place. To find a Canadian who not only is not someone that another team can try and pick on, but is actually a strength of your team, makes you a Grey Cup contender. And proof of that is you look at the Argos roster coming into this year, they were probably the only team going into the draft yesterday who didn't need a thing. They didn't need anything. You look at the guys they drafted, aside from maybe one player, I don't know if any of those guys are actually even going to play this year, because I don't think that was a priority. These guys are drafted for 2024 because their core of Canadians is so solid. And when you're in that position, it affords you the luxury to be able to continue that cycle, keep drafting for the future. And that's how you build a dynasty. So the CFL draft does matter because that's how you win long term. And they're not always the guys that are on the highlight of the night. They're not always the guys making the ridiculous catches in the end zone or the 20 sack seasons. Like, it's not always those guys. But having a team without any holes, without any weaknesses, without having to hide anybody is actually how you breed success in the CFL.
It's just so weird, and obviously not the purpose of the draft is not in and of itself to be a TV juggernaut or an interest building juggernaut, but it does feel like it is something that could be in the CFL in some form or fashion in the world. And I was just looking up the ratings here. They had 11.4 million people watch the draft per whatever station here in America. Like, I look at the coverage and I see all that. Is it just because there's not there's no immediate payoff for it? You got to wait 2-3 years.
I think that's part of it. I think part of it is that they're still getting used to, like, even the draft being on regular TV for a couple of rounds is still a fairly new thing. But like, this always amazes me. Like, no sports draft really should be good TV. Somehow it is, and I will watch. I watched every round of the NFL draft. I will watch drafts, but there's something wrong with me. I don't think it makes a lot of sense. Like, the NFL draft, it wasn't that long ago they were holding the draft in a used car dealership, right? Like, it was just how it went. They're like, people actually want to watch this, want to hear about this, and they put it on TV and it took off, and now we've got hundreds of millions of people watching the NFL draft. It's really weird. The CFL is a little bit behind on that, but I don't think, like you said, I don't think it will ever quite reach that level, even like per capita, that the NFL draft does, because you're right. Like the guys that you draft in the first round in the NFL, those guys are going to be immediate difference makers. Most of them, you're expecting that they actually have a tangible. It'd make a tangible difference on the football field. If they don't, that's a bust. In the CFL draft, you're hoping that first rounder is still on the team at the end of the year. It's a very different thing. And if he starts, amazing. Toronto's first round pick last year, Gregor McKellar, actually played at guard, and that was seen as a huge success. Like, hey, look at this rookie actually starting, because it just doesn't happen a lot.
Is that compounded with more, and not that the NFL isn't transient either, but the more transient property it feels like of CFL players on the teams?
Yeah, I don't know if that's like, I think part of it is too, like, again, when you're looking at NFL and CFL, there's a big difference in attention to college and university football between the two countries. And I think that has to enter into the conversation too. Like the NFL, in that first round, you already know who all those guys are. No NFL fan, well, I shouldn't say no. Most NFL fans don't have to look this up. They've been studying for months as well. They've been doing mock drafts on PFF or wherever they do their mock drafts. They know every player in that first round. They know about their stats, where they played, stories about them. And by and large, the Canadian fans don't. People do watch university football, but it's largely their own city, their own school. That's what they pay attention to. But even that, it pales into comparison to what you see. Like a city like Toronto, which is a huge city, even by American standards, it would be one of the biggest cities in the U.S. And yet you have a couple thousand people, on a good day watching the York Lions or the U of T Blues. It just doesn't draw that way. And most people in the city couldn't name a single player on any of those teams. Now, it's not the same necessarily when you go out to Saskatchewan, you go to Alberta. There's a little bit more interest, but still nowhere to the degree that you have of what's happening like Tallahassee, right, or Baton Rouge or something like that, where it's just everybody knows everything, and you can all nationwide, everyone can at least name 3 or 4 players on every Power 5 team.
So in terms of the draft this year, you said Argos, stashing stuff. Who, some of the teams you were impressed with, and some of the names? I have the list here on Wikipedia right now, but some just kind of big picture, any of the teams that you thought did a particularly good job
in the draft yesterday. So there's a couple that stood out, although again, like trying to prognosticate, like the CFL draft is really hard to predict. I'm usually terrible at it. I actually did all right this year by my standards, and I do feel like I know what I'm doing going in. Like I've been around football for a really long time. I went to the combine in Edmonton. I've studied the film of these guys. I've graded them all. I've got film grades and testing grades and a system to pull it all together. And yet still I swing and miss way more than I hit. And so I was really impressed, first of all, that Toronto did not leave me in the dust for the 4th year in a row, because each of the last 3 years they picked someone in the first round that I had as like a 3rd or 4th round prospect. And every time they made the pick, I'm like, where is this coming from? And this year I didn't have that, but pretty much every team had 2 or 3 guys that I had in my top 15, but then they would spend, 2nd, 3rd, 4th round pick on somebody that I either didn't even have on my board or somebody that I had way down at the bottom of my list. But, just off the top of my head, I thought Ottawa did really nicely. It's easy when you have the first overall pick and 2 picks in the first 10. But yeah, they got a couple guys that I had really high on my board. Dante Bull, offensive lineman from Fresno State. He was my number 1 overall prospect. Loved him. And he's a guy that could actually get in there right away and contribute. He could be one of those first year starters for sure for an Ottawa team that needs some help on the line. They also got Lucas Cormier, who was my draft crush this year a DB out of Mount Allison, and the guys that play out east don't typically get a lot of celebration. They're not usually talked about very much. Mount Allison, especially, not really known as a football powerhouse. But man, I loved his tape, and I was hoping he would fall to the Argos. Although they don't really need a safety. It wasn't really a huge need for them. But I just loved his play, and so Ottawa, to get him and Bull, those are two guys that could probably step in right away. So that impressed me. And then Edmonton, it seemed like Edmonton was on the clock every 2 or 3 minutes. But yeah, they got a bunch of guys early on, but they were inconsistent. And that's a very Chris Jones thing. He had a bunch of picks that were also like way off my board as well. So there's no one that ran away with it. Calgary has a couple really nice receivers that I have both in my top 10. So, but it was spread around pretty well. And there was no one that really, I thought, bombed it either. Like, I looked through my top 15, everybody's there. So it was, I thought, a pretty even draft.
In terms of kind of, and obviously we have, rookies are just reporting all of this. We've, it feels like CFL, it's in the long rearview mirror here, Grey Cup and everything. Like, what are the odds this year? What are teams looking like, right? I mean, obviously, Toronto's trying to figure out with Chad Kelly and everything. I love Vernon as a person for BC. I don't know always what I feel like about quarterback there, right? So what are teams you're looking forward to this year finding success?
It's not exciting, but I think Winnipeg should be good. I'm so tired of Winnipeg being good. Like, could we please get somebody new in the Grey Cup from the West? That'd be fantastic. They're a good team. Again, they're going to be good. I think they're better than they were last year. That's the thing. Like, some of their pieces, some of their big pieces are getting older. At some point, that's going to matter, but it hasn't shown up yet. And just, anytime you've got a good head coach quarterback relationship, which they do, in Mike O'Shea and Zach Claras, you're already going to be in the mix. But yeah, just adding some of the weapons that they've got on top of what was already probably the best team in the CFL. I know the Argos won the Grey Cup, but I think Winnipeg was the best team up until that game. So I would expect them to be back again. With everyone else, there's a question mark. I think Toronto's probably they're probably the second most ready, but like you mentioned, there's a huge question mark there, and it matters a lot. It's not like, we're not sure about our holder. Like, we're talking about, we're not sure about the quarterback. That's going to be a big deal. Now, I personally believe in Chad Kelly, having watched him all year last year at practice, having watched a lot of his career too. I actually have been kind of following his career since he was in high school, because I was enamored with him at the punt pass kick competition, where as like a 14-year-old, he was throwing the ball like 80 yards down the field. And so I did kind of, follow his career along a little bit. I have full faith in him, but it's easy for me to say we haven't actually seen him do it on the field yet. So if that's your maybe second best team in the league, and they've got questions at the most important position in all of sports, it kind of means it's anyone's league. So I think it should be a pretty exciting season because of that, because there aren't clear haves and have-nots the way there have been over the last few years.
Well, and we've seen so much, shuffling. I mean, obviously, like I said, Vernon's, back in BC, but, Bo Levi's moving around, and, my now friend of the podcast, Cody Fajardo, that's a long story. Now friend of the podcast is on, and we got Trevor Harris and all of that. Like, I know we're trying, like, it's so hard. You look at paper and all of that, but it does seem like, there's a little bit more fluidity heading into the season, where you might have to kind of see where the dust settles before we really know.
Yeah, and we nothing would really surprise me. Like, I think aside from Winnipeg, if any other team in the league, you said at the halfway point, only had 2 or 3 wins, I don't know that it's that shocking, right? Because you look at every team, like Saskatchewan was, I don't know what they were last year. They're a mess. Calgary has got so much turnover. All their stars were picked by the other teams, but it also wouldn't surprise me if they went to the Grey Cup. So, with all these teams like that, Montreal is the only one probably where I think they're in a bit of trouble, because they had such a bumpy offseason. I think they lost a lot of talent. They're going to, I think, have a little bit of trouble getting off the ground this year, but they've got talent there too. So, and the East it's so hard to predict at the best of times. So, I expect Ottawa to rebound. Edmonton, I expect to rebound too. So it's going to be come like September, October. I think they're going to be some really cool playoff races. I think probably Winnipeg's got a bit of distance in the West, but I think everyone else is at least believing they've got a shot.
It seems like, and just to reflect back on the Toronto quarterback situation before I let you go, it does seem like Chad has gotten a little bit like big in his britches. Like, I think there was a little bit of the bombasticness before. You're like, oh, that's funny, whatever. But it does seem like he's really like, no, I'm better than everyone. I played a quarter of football and won the Grey Cup. Like, are you sensing that with Chad a little bit?
Yes and no. I don't personally like that. I like from a quarterback, and I don't really, I can't justify this. I have trouble with it because I really like quarterbacks to think that way. I always want you to believe that you're the best. I want you to believe that you have been overlooked and that you're going to prove yourself right and everybody else wrong. I love that attitude. I don't usually like quarterbacks, team leaders to say that stuff, for it to come out on social media or whatever else, because you just don't typically see it. But I have trouble explaining why. Like, I don't know, is that just sort of like an old coach thing that I've got going on? Maybe it is. Maybe that's just me in my I don't know, 1970s mentality of things, where it's the Paul Brown thing, act like you've been there before. I do like that. I prefer that. But having a quarterback that doesn't have confidence, we saw what happened with Dane Evans when he lost his confidence. You can't, if you lose your confidence as a quarterback, you're done. And so you've got to think that way. It's just there are times where I wish Chad didn't always say it, but I wouldn't fault him for thinking that. And the other thing is, I think he's right. Like, I do think he's better than a lot of the quarterbacks in the NFL. And I think he would be in the NFL if he hadn't had some issues off the field, if he hadn't made some mistakes. And the good thing when you look at Chad is that he hasn't made mistakes. Since he's come to Toronto, he's stayed out of trouble. He's been a great teammate. He was awesome on the practice field last year, encouraging guys, talking to fans that would come out to watch the practice, being a positive influence on some of the younger players there too, because he is, he's not a younger player. And so all of those things, he's doing everything right in that regard. It's just those little, the little quotes that sometimes make it out there. And I think that's what people tend to gravitate towards, because it seems very un-quarterback-like, right? But, it's Chad being Chad. He's going to have to actually back it up, though, this season, because he is the guy. And so we'll see how he handles that. I expect him to do really well, but we'll see.
It's so funny. I was watching the BC Lions new their Arrow Up, the webisode today, and Vernon was doing this big, had all the guys come down to Tacoma, which is, I'm like, oh, I've like filmed the wedding at that hotel. I'm like, I know exactly where that is. And Dane Evans was like walking in the workout room, like shaking people. I'm like, oh, that's right. Like, Dane's in BC now. Like, I kind of forget, it's like, it really is kind of like the prodigal son or something. Like, he just cast like what, Dane just has seemed like his stock has fallen so much.
It has. I really like that guy. I hope he can pull it together. Like, he absolutely torched the Argos in the East Final 2 years ago. I don't think I've ever seen a better half from a CFL quarterback. And then the next season, it was different. But it's tough, when you go into the season as the number 2 quarterback, there's no pressure on you. You are everyone's favorite, right? There's no one more popular than the backup quarterback at all times on any given football team. And suddenly, when it's yours and it's your hat to wear, that's a very different feeling. And it seemed like Dane struggled a little bit with that. But he's, just, knowing the kind of person he is, he's very open and honest with it, with that part of his game. And he's talked about that. It's something he's obviously worked on. And I think if he does get a shot, I think he's in the perfect position. That's a talented team. And if something happens out there and he needs to play, I think you'll see that old confidence, that old Dane Evans come back in. But it's true. It's, it doesn't take long in this game to go from, here to here. And it's you talked about this earlier in the conversation where, and I think I answered a whole different question. I went off onto a tangent, but yeah, you forget it's so easy year to year. Where is this guy now? Where is this guy now? And we're used to free agency in all sports, but you certainly see it a lot in the CFL, where if you're not following along in the offseason, sometimes it takes you a few weeks to realize where everyone has gone to in the CFL.
I would be remiss here if I didn't ask. We got our big Toronto's, insider here before I let you go. Friend of the show, our boy Brian Scott now is going up to, you're going to get, I've heard for years, CFL's been clamoring for Brian, and we've had Brian on MVP, and then he, was in the USFL injured, and then, things fell out in the XFL, and I've heard various accounts of all that. really hard for players to make it in the CFL, right? Americans coming in, and we've seen the Paxton Lynches of the world and all that. Does Brian have any chance of sticking in with the Argos here?
I think he does, because again, look at that quarterback room. It's all new faces, right? I like them all. Like, Scott's a great player, and yes, he's run into some obstacles along the way. But talk about like pedigree and ability. You watch his highlight tape and see some of the stuff that he's done on the football field. I'm excited about that addition to the room, and I already liked the quarterback room. Ben Holmes is a great quarterback. Look, don't forget that he's in the room too. And so between those three guys, that's where I'm not that worried. I felt like this was a good strategy for Toronto this offseason, and I've heard a lot of criticism. And some of the guys I work with at Xs and Argos too that aren't 100% sure necessarily all the time that this is the right plan to go in with no CFL experience essentially. But I like these guys, and I think between the three of them, they're not young guys. This is not like you've brought in 3 22-year-olds. So yeah, they're inexperienced, but all three of those guys are great quarterbacks, and it doesn't matter where you're watching them play, whether it's the Ole Miss film or Tarrangton State or whatever it is you're turning on. You watch Chad Kelly, Holmes, Scott. It's good football. So whoever is in, and I don't expect Chad Kelly to play every single snap of every single game. It's probably not going to happen realistically. One of these guys is going to have to come in. I'm really not worried about it.
You have made the cardinal sin of bringing up Mr. Ben Holmes' name on the podcast. Ben Holmes is the only player in the history I've done. This will be episode 144 of this show. Ben Holmes is the only player that's ever stood me up for an interview and then went on to go win the Grey Cup. So I wish him luck in the CFL, but he certainly he no-showed my show and then had a horrendous showing in the preseason for the USFL and got cut. So I'm glad that he has found a home up there in the Grey Cup ring, and he's probably doing better than he would have been doing otherwise.
You got to give it another shot, because I've never had anything but positive stuff from him. Whether it's at practice, sometimes I'll bring my son along, and he's always good for a wave, maybe throw the ball, something like that. Just seems like, I don't know him well, but he seems like a pretty good guy. So I think you got to try round 2. If he gets in this year at some point, that'd be the time to ring him up.
Yeah, you just gotta remember, he stood me up, not the other way around. I appreciate that. Ben, it's long time extended here. I appreciate you coming on, but I thought we tackled a lot of stuff. And like I said, got to ramp up the CFL stuff again now. So I'm excited to kind of get us through the summer, and it should be fun.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed talking football with you. I'm glad to do it anytime.
Special thanks to all of our guests coming on today. Matt Barrie, always making time, incredibly busy, as well as Kevin Kugler with Fox Sports. Really appreciate that. And then Devion Smith, coming out of practice, doing the interview. Matt, everyone over with the Renegades. Really appreciate that. And then obviously Ben Grant spending extended time there talking CFL kind of off-season stuff, as we are excited for the season. Talking about the CFL gets me excited. If you guys are watching the USFL or the XFL, get ready for the CFL. It's fun. The storylines are great. The fan bases, the richness of the history of all the teams. I get very excited. And I think it's going to be a really unpredictable year. Just so many quarterbacks have switched teams, and the Alouettes, they lost their owners, and now they're like the new look Saskatchewan Roughriders, and Saskatchewan's got Trevor Harris. Like, going to be crazy. Going to be interesting to see kind of all of that stuff. Like I said, show next Saturday, not Friday. It's going to be Saturday. But if you want to come to the Alamo with us, I will be booking. I don't think I have to book the tour, but I think I can call them and say, hey, we're going to have 15 people coming. But send me an email, the Markcast podcast at gmail.com, or send me a DM, the Markcast on Twitter, if you want to be a part of the tour, so I can get an accurate guest list in. We will see you guys all next week. Like I said, live show 2 to 4 local time Central on Saturday. Should be fun. Championship game. And then, we'll probably be doing a recap of some sort on Monday as well. After that, we will figure that out. Thank you all for your support. We'll see you soon. Don't forget, everything's bigger in Texas. It's going to be fun. The light, the stars at night shine big and bright in the heart of Texas. That's the whole thing there. Going to be drinking lots of Shiner Box. Should be fun. See you soon.